Chapter 2. News of a Journey. Eobald was at the door when Wulfstan reached the monastery, where he had been told to attend Pope Gregory. "God be with you," said Eobald, or Brother Sylvanus, as Wulfstan had long become accustomed to calling him. "And with you, brother." Wulfstan's reply was a shade absent-minded. Brother Sylvanus was doubtless humble enough in his approach to God, but he had little use for those he considered beneath him. He had forgotten the dreadful days of the voyage in the slave trader's galley. He had forgotten that Wulfstan had cared for him then, that he might well be said to owe his life to the older man. The one thing Brother Sylvanus could not forget was that in England he had been a chieftain's son. His breeding fitted him for learning. His profession as a monk came soon after his baptism, and his promotion followed as rapidly. He was clever, well suited to be confidant and secretary to Pope Gregory himself, as well as head of studies in his own native tongue. Wolfson would never have denied these things. He respected the abilities of his countryman. But try as he would not swallow that air of lofty disdain. In his own way, Wulfstan was just as responsible to Pope Gregory as Brother Sylvanus himself. But his was the yeoman task, the task of a man who had never been taught to read or write and whose capabilities did not qualify him to learn. He worked by instinct. His skills were inherited skills, the care of beasts and the growing of grain. Wulfstan could not have attempted Brother Sylvanus's work, but he wished that Sylvanus would admit his own inability to do Wulfstan's. "The Holy Father is waiting," Brother Sylvanus said now. "Hurry, I came at once. Would you have me greet him with unwashed hands?" He spoke ironically, for he knew Sylvanus thought of him as a farmer whose hands were forever soiled and stained with his occupation. Brother Sylvanus did not reply. He went ahead of Wulfstan across the country courtyard where fountains played in the still cool evening. The monastery of St. Anthony had been Pope Gregory's family home. Stripped now of its richest ornaments, it remained a place of great beauty. Tall cypresses grew on either side of paved walks, and from the terraces you could look out over the city to the farther hills and see the mist lying upon the river's face at dusk and dawn. Vaguely worried as he was by the unexpected summons, Wulfstan followed so briskly where he was led that Sylvanus had to hurry his dignified steps or have his fellow countryman tread upon his heels. A faint smile softened Wulfstan's rather grim expression. Then the smile turned to a shamefaced grin as he realized that he would want to tell the tale of Brother Sylvanus's discomfort to his children. Pope Gregory was walking in one of the long avenues of cypress with a tall, thin man at his side. "Wait here, Wulfstan." Wulfstan stood and watched the monk walk away between the trees. Before he was halfway to the Pope, Gregory and his companion turned and began pacing back the way they had come, then stopped as Sylvanus reached them and spoke, bowing to the Pope. At once Gregory had put his hand on his companion's arm. They both stood looking at past Sylvanus to where Wulfstan waited. Gregory said something to his companion, then at once beckoned Wulfstan. He was smiling. The appearance he gave of welcoming an old and valued friend took away the bitter taste that had been in Wulfstan's mouth since he encountered Brother Sylvanus. Without waiting for any further summons, Wulfstan went smiling toward Pope Gregory, remembering to drop on one knee when he reached him, instead, as he would have preferred, of clasping both his hands in grateful friendship. "God and his servant bless you, Wulfstan," Gregory said. "Now rise up quickly and look long and hard upon this brother beside me. Do you know him?" "Of course, Holy Father. It is the Father Prior. It is Father Augustine." "Yes, it is Augustine, and he is to be my active self. He is to fulfill my dearest ambition while I must remain behind in Rome. He is going to take you home, Wulfstan, my friend." When Wulfstan returned to his own house, it was in darkness, save for one small glimmer. With a saucer of oil burning on the ground beside him, Wulf was lying on a mat on the porch. He was watching for his father's return, but he had fallen asleep. As the time wore away, he was curled as comfortably as a calf in straw. Wulfstan thought. He sighed. What had been offered him had been hard to refuse. Even now he was uncertain that he had been right to refuse it. Looking down at Wolf, he saw first a young boy who must still be cared for and cherished, and second, a boy who was already becoming a man and who might himself have chosen differently. As Wolfstan stepped past his son, Wolf stirred and was instantly awake. Father, go back to sleep. But I am awake now. Wolf looked at his father, wondering if he dared ask a question. He saw that Wolfstan was worried, concerned with something Wolf knew nothing about. An immense sympathy for his father swelled up in his heart. He felt for a moment as though they were nearer to being brothers than father and son. And it was this that made him ask, not boldly or inquisitively, but simply as if he had a right to know. What did the Holy Father say to you? Prior Augustine was with him. Wolfstan hesitated, as though uncertain how much he could tell the boy. He is a great preacher. Did he preach to you this evening, then? No, it was not for that I was called, Wolfstan sighed. Then he joined Wolf on the mat, and the pair of them sat side by side, their backs against the wall. Pope Gregory has one dear wish. For many years it has been so. Now it will be fulfilled. Is it the mission to our country? Wolf asked. His father looked at him curiously in the dim light of the passageway. Wolf felt himself turning red. He looked upon himself as a Roman. Here his home had been for as long as he could remember. Though he was fairer than his young companions and spoke with a slightly different inflection, he was accepted as one of them indeed. He would have been deeply wounded if any had treated him as a stranger. And yet, in this moment of confidence in the dark midnight, he spoke of our country and meant the island in which he had been born. Wolfstan nodded. Yes, it is the mission to England. You know, as I do, that Pope Gregory, when he was still a plain monk, wished to lead such a mission himself. The people would not let him go. Now, at last, he has chosen a leader, Prior Augustine. Wolf broke in. Are we to go with him? My boy, I cannot leave Rome while your mother is sick. I have told the Holy Father. I understand, Wolf said, ashamed of his disappointment. He will understand too. But I know I should pay my debt. I speak my native tongue. This would be of great value. For this I was saved from the slave market and given my freedom. God help me, I should pay my debt. At this moment they heard stir and call out. Wolfstan rose at once to go to her. He touched his son's head as he left him. It is between the two of us. Say nothing. When his father had gone and the house once more was silent, Wolf lay back on the mat with his hands behind his head and stared at the shadow cast by the lamp on the wall near him. Perhaps this was the first time Wolf had given himself up to serious thought. Ordinarily, he was occupied with active matters. He had his own work to do about the place, not only the goats, but other tasks he did for his mother and Esta, the old woman who had come to cook when first became too ill. Every morning at 7, he and 20 boys or so, children of fathers employed like his own on the domestic affairs of the monastery, went to lessons presided over by Brother Severus. They worked until noon. Later, Wolf and two others, but they were poor pupils, went to speak the English tongue with Brother Sylvanus. Wolf was always glad to be released from lessons, but he was interested in serious games like running and throwing and in swimming and diving and wrestling. He loved his life in Rome without ever pausing to think that he loved it. He was fortunate. His father had good employment. The family was well housed and well fed. His father was respected for honesty and uprightness and great judgment. His mother was held in affection by the other women and never criticized or derided as a stranger from a barbarous land where men had rejected the teachings of Christ and returned to the worship of false gods. For the first time, lying there in the half dark, Wolf found himself questioning all this. However much he might owe to Rome, it was not his native country, as it was his sister's, as it was his friend Toulouse. Somewhere in the dark, forgotten place of his memory, there was another land, not always sunny, harshly troubled by invasion and pillage and paganism. And suddenly it seemed wrong that this land meant more to Pope Gregory, who had never set foot in it, than to Wolf, who had been born there and been torn from it by force. He saw his father pass just out of range of the feeble lamplight, carrying a pitcher to fill at the well. Wolf rose and followed him outside. It was a warm night and very still. Looking out over the terraced hills was like looking into a mighty pool above which the stars hung hugely. Wolf could see his father's dark figure in the starlight, stooping at the well, hauling, lifting the full pitcher, which splashed back some water in the darkness below. Father, get into the house and sleep. How will you do your lessons in the morning? When will they go to England? When they are ready. Soon. Before the summer fair? Asked Wolf. What has the summer fair to do with Pope Gregory, Father Augustine, and England? Demanded Wulfstan, half laughing. Toulouse may win the juggling. I would sooner be there to see him. What should stop you? I could go to England. I could go in your place. Starlight or no, it was too dark for Wolf to see his father's face. They do say a son may pay his father's debts, Wulfstan said, shouldering the pitcher. Then shall I? Wait until the morning, my son. We are all brave in the dark. Come now. You must sleep. Wait until the morning. When morning came, Wulfstan was away from the house and about his work by the time Wolf woke. Esta was pulling loaves from the oven as the boy went yawning outside. The smell of the hot bread filled the air and sharpened his appetite. He went to the well and drew himself some water and plunged his face into it and splashed the water over his head and neck and arms. Hurry, said the old woman. You'll be late for school. Brother Severus will beat you. Wolf did not reply. He had remembered the mission, and his heart thumped. He felt bold at once. Give me some bread. You shall have it when you ask decently. What would your poor mother say if she heard you speak like that to an old woman? You talk too much. You know too many words. You said I was late. Give me the bread to eat as I go. Here, then, she grumbled to herself as she sorted the loaves and chose what she thought fitting for him. Then he saw his mother at the door. She moved slowly, holding on to the wall. She was pale, and her hollow eyes looked almost black. Wolf thrust the hot bread inside his shirt and ran to her. How tall you have grown, Wolf. I saw how tall as you stood beside old Esta. And I am tall beside you too, mother. I could carry you all the way across the city on my back and not know it. Well, you shall do so one day, when I feel a little stronger, she smiled at him. Now get off with you to your lessons. Give me your blessing then, mother, he said, quickly kneeling. Her hands on his head were as light and thin as last year's leaves. May God bless you, my dearest son. A terrible fear made Wolf tremble. Not daring to look at her, he stumbled to his feet and rushed away. When he reached the gate of the monastery, he discovered that he had not had one bite of bread. He knew now why his father could not leave E and go with the mission to England. He knew also that he was, after all, not brave enough to go himself. It was not so long since the Lombards, the people dwelling in the great northern plain, had risen under their warlike king and battled their way down through the length of Italy until they stood at the very gates of Rome. For hundreds of miles, the countryside had been ravaged by these people. The wisdom of Gregory, his counsel, and brave admonishment of the savage king of the Lombards had saved the city from destruction. Already the occasion had taken on the glory of a legend, and there were those eager to claim this as a miracle, proving that a saint moved among them. Famine and pestilence had followed the terrible destruction of the countryside. Wulfstan could speak of that, but for young Wolf there was no such memories. He had grown in the confidence and contentment of a secure home, and the years of his childhood were years of recovery. Now granaries were full once more, and order prevailed in the city and countryside close by. Further afield, however, because beyond the hills that circled and contained the holy city, there was an incessant small warfare. Skirmishing and pillaging made travel dangerous and difficult. How will they fare as they cross the great plains, as they journey toward the sea or the mountains? This was the question heard on all sides as news of the mission to the distant island spread among the people. They will never return. They will never reach the barbarians' country, never reach the mountains, never cross the sea. In spite of these gloomy prophecies, the mission was planned and ordered within a short time. For although the men who set out would be preparing for a battle, their weapons were not heavy to carry, being their own wits and their faith and their steadfast courage. Nor was there any lack of laymen ready to accompany the monks as ostlers and smiths and the like. The adventurers drew them. They would step out into the unknown. Though it might swallow them, yet they could not resist its enticement. Some people considered that these men should not include be included in the mission at all. That is for the monks alone to take all responsibility. But the size of the community was such that too great a number could not be withdrawn. As it was, 40 men in all would make up the mission, and of these, about two-thirds were professed monks. It was Wulfstan's job to order the stores, to select little sturdy horses accustomed to long journeying, and pack mules to carry the burden. Brother Severus is to go with them, Wulf told his friend Toulouse. Then we shall have no lessons, cried Toulouse, overjoyed at the news. Oh, there is a new schoolmaster. It is Brother Hugo, who comes from beyond the Elbe. My father has seen him. He is short and fat and looks merry, so he says. If he could not go with the mission, Wolfe at least had the pleasure of passing on information to his friends. Besides Brother Severus, there were others known to Wolfe among the missionaries. There was, of course, the Englishman, Eobald, or Brother Sylvanus, who had been a chieftain's son. He would be guide and interpreter when they came to his native land. There was Brother Lucian, one of the infirmarians, and Brother Adrian, a cook, and others Wolfe knew only by seeing them about the cloisters when he went on some message for his father. The mission set out for Rome at dawn on a morning in late May. Wolfe was up as early as his father, and the pair of them went to the monastery chapel. There was not room for all of those who had come, and they knelt about the open doors, joining in as well as they could. Pope Gregory himself said the Mass that dedicated the mission and prayed for its success. He did so less as the sovereign pontiff than as the abbot of that monastic house which he had founded in his own home, the place of all places in the world toward which his spirit turned, from which he had been drawn reluctantly to take up his great office. Kneeling outside in the quiet dawn, fidgeting as the rough ground bit his knees, Wolfe thought less of his prayers than of what lay ahead for these men. He longed to be going with them. He wished with all his heart that he might set out with the rest, secure in his father's company, having said farewell to a mother strong enough to bear the parting, healthy enough to expect with confidence their return. In his mind, he saw all England as a place of great darkness, as though thick forests grew everywhere and hid the light from the native peoples. He thought it again, my country, and I must go to it. It could not be now, but he prayed that it might be soon. Round about him, the people rose up and drew back on either side as the monks came in procession from the chapel. At the gates of the monastery, as Wolfe knew, the horses and mules would be assembled, and his father would be there with them, checking the stores and seeing that everything was in order. The head of the procession, young brother Antonius, carrying the cross, now stepped from the chapel into the increasing morning. After him came 6 of the senior brethren. After them, walking alone, Augustine the leader. He was a tall man and seemed at this moment to have gained stature over everyone else about him. His face was grave but calm. Though he had tucked his hands into his sleeves modestly, his eyes looking straight ahead were more proud than humble. There was courage in his face and a burning light that must surely inspire all who saw it. Yet, looking at him as he passed, Wolfe waited in vain to feel affection well up in him. For that kind of love which a dedicated leader can often call up in his followers, Wolfe felt a great respect, a great awe, but he could not imagine this man of God as his friend. As the procession moved off, Wolfe began to run alongside. Halfway to the gates, he found Toulouse running with him. They shot through the gateway ahead of the procession and took up their places on a high bank opposite. At the gateway, the rank broke as the monks consulted about the stores and the animals. Then they reformed in a new order. Augustine mounted and moved off at a walking pace. The rest led their animals, and the pack mules and servants followed. The crowd now began to move in a disorderly way. Where all had been silent and awestruck, now they started to cry out blessings and farewells. Some were the families of those leaving for their unknown future, parents and sisters of monks, the wives of 2 of the ostlers, young women who wept and wailed together at the loss of their husbands, who seemed to care very little at leaving them, and kept their eyes fixed firmly ahead, as though only the future had any claims on them. Slowly the procession gained on the crowd as more of the monks took to their horses. There was an increasing clatter of hooves on the cobbles, then the deadened thud of hooves on dust. The voices of the crowd became louder. Their praises became a lament. Their hurrying ceased, and they fell back at last, first to a jog trot, then to a walk, then to a silent stillness. The noise of the horses was taken into the quiet of early morning as the sun increased, rising and flooding the city and the city's hills with radiance. Gradually, the crowd broke up. In ones and twos, those who were left behind moved off toward their homes. Soon no one was left but a very old woman kneeling in the roadway, staring after what was vanished, as motionless as if she had died there on her knees. Then at last she too rose slowly and stiffly to her feet, and straightened her back painfully and shuffled away. If I had gone, said Wolf to Toulouse, as they scrambled down from their high perch, would you have come too? Toulouse shook his head very firmly. I am not a monk, and England is not my country, praise be, and even for friendship's sake, well, I would sooner stay and win the juggling at the fair. Wolf gave him a shove that sent him sprawling down the bank with a shout of surprise. So much for friendship, cried Wolf, roaring with laughter. Behind them there was a clash and a clang as the porter, Brother Andreas, closed the great gates and bolted them, then rattled his huge key into the lock and turned it to make all secure. The mission had departed, and the monastery must return to its daily routine. Once more the world was shut out. Wolf and Toulouse went slowly homeward. Both experienced a feeling of flatness. The rest of the day remained, and for them it would be a day like any other, except that lessons would be presided over by the new teacher, Brother Hugo. Okay, hi, my friends. There's a couple things in this chapter that I want to just go over that could be confusing, or words that maybe I thought we wouldn't know the meaning of, because some of them I had to look up. So, one of the things is one of the characters, Eobald, that's mentioned in the first chapter, the guy that Wulfstan helped when they were taken as slaves. He's also Brother Sylvanus. They're the same person. When he became a monk, he changed his name to Brother Sylvanus. So, they use both names, but that's the same person. Eobald is also Brother Sylvanus. Brother Severus, which his name is very close, so that's why I wanted to mention that one. He's their teacher, but he's leaving for the mission trip to England, and he is being replaced by Brother Hugo. So his name's close to Eobald's name, Sylvanus, but he is Brother Severus. It also talked about how there were no lack of laymen ready to go on the missions trip. So that was them saying that lots of people were volunteering, people who weren't part of the monastery, people who weren't monks or priests that wanted to go. And it mentioned that a lot of them were going to go as smiths or ostlers. And you guys know kind of the term smith, I think, like a blacksmith or a woodsmith or a steelsmith. They're guys who work with a certain type of material. But ostler, I wasn't sure you would know that term because I didn't know what it was. It's a person who takes care of the horses. So because they were traveling on horseback, they had to take ostlers with them. Those are the guys who take care of the horses. The other thing that was mentioned in this chapter is Brother Lucian, the infirmarian. An infirmarian is the person who works at the infirmary, and an infirmary is their version of a hospital. So the monastery probably had its own hospital, and the nurse or doctor who works there is called the infirmarian. So that's it for now.